The Omega Directive was never meant to be used. Admiral Ilara Vex stared at the holographic display as the remnants of Earth's Third Fleet engaged the Galaxies armada at the edge of the Sol system. Brilliant flashes of light marked the deaths of ships and crews as the impossible odds played out before her eyes. Humanity's last major defensive line was crumbling. The Proxima Centauri colony has gone dark, Admiral, Lieutenant Orion Tyvek reported, his voice hollow. Ganymede and Europa stations are evacuating to Earth. Vex's weathered face remained impassive, but her grip on the command console tightened until her knuckles turned white. 16 years of war against the Galaxis Dominion had brought humanity to this precipice, their backs against the wall of their own solar system. The Council is demanding your presence in the war room, said Commander Laith Nassar, her XO for the past decade. His cybernetic eye glowed faintly as he studied her. They're discussing the Omega Directive. A chill ran through the command center of Artemis Station. Everyone knew what the Omega Directive meant. A desperate gambit using experimental technology that could either save humanity or accelerate their extinction. Status of the Valhalla project? Vex asked, already moving toward the exit. Dr. Kieran Maddox reports it's operational but untested, Nassar replied, falling into step beside her. She's calling it a cosmic roll of the dice. The orbital elevator descended rapidly toward Earth's surface, offering a panoramic view of the once beautiful blue planet. Massive defense installations now scarred the landscape. Refugee megacities sprawled across former wilderness, and orbital shipyards worked ceaselessly to replace vessels destroyed in battle. In the Federation Council's underground war room, tensions were higher than the radiation readings near Jupiter's compromised defense grid. The Galaxies have refused all diplomatic overtures for 16 years, bellowed Counselor Dai Yu Zhao, slamming her fist on the table. They've made their intentions clear: total human extinction. We have no choice. High General Fenris Kalani shook his head. The Valhalla project could destabilize the fabric of space-time itself. We're talking about weaponizing the fundamental forces of the universe. And if we do nothing, humanity becomes a footnote in galactic history, retorted Dr. Maddox, her heterochromatic eyes, one green, one amber, flashing with conviction. The lead scientist of the Valhalla project had the haunted look of someone who'd created something they feared as much as they revered. Admiral Vex entered silently, taking in the scene. 7 counselors, 3 generals, and the architect of what might be humanity's salvation or damnation. Admiral, Federation President Ikon Yaga acknowledged her with a nod. The Galaxies fleet will reach Earth within 18 hours. We need your assessment. Vex studied the tactical display. 300 Galaxies dreadnoughts against Earth's remaining defenses. The math was brutally simple. The conventional war is lost, she said quietly. Even if we deployed every ship, drone, and weapon we have left, we'd only delay the inevitable by days. A heavy silence blanketed the room. Then we activate Valhalla, President Nyaga said, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Maddox's hands trembled slightly. You need to understand, this isn't just a weapon. The entanglement cascade will affect all Galaxies technology simultaneously throughout the galaxy. But the physics is theoretical. The ripple effects could be unpredictable. Vex looked around, the room at the faces of those who carried the burden of humanity's survival. They had exhausted every option, broken every ethical boundary, and still found themselves here, at the end. We faced an enemy that refused coexistence from first contact, Vex said. They've systematically destroyed every human colony they could reach. This isn't about winning anymore, it's about survival. President Nyaga nodded gravely. Then, as the last act of this Federation Council, I authorize the implementation of the Omega Directive. May whatever gods exist forgive us. What none of them knew was that across the galaxy, other species watched with bated breath. The Galaxis Dominion had subjugated dozens of civilizations before targeting humanity, and humanity's response would change everything. The Valhalla complex lay beneath the ice sheets of Antarctica, a testament to human ingenuity and desperation. Admiral Vex's shuttle descended through howling winds toward the innocuous entrance. Just another research station to casual observers. Security scan complete. Welcome to Valhalla, Admiral, came a synthetic voice as Vex and Dr. Maddox stepped into the decontamination chamber. 16 years of research, billions in resources, all for a weapon we hoped never to use, Maddox said quietly as they descended in the elevator. Her silver-streaked auburn hair was pulled back severely, emphasizing the gaunt angles of her face. Like many of Earth's remaining scientists, she'd sacrificed everything for this project. Tell me how it works again, Vex requested, needing to hear it one final time. The Galaxies use quantum-entangled particles to coordinate their fleet movements and communications, Maddox explained. It's what makes them so formidable. Instantaneous command and control across light years. We've spent years capturing their entangled particles from destroyed ships. The elevator opened to reveal an enormous spherical chamber. At its center floated a pulsing blue orb of energy contained within interlocking gravitational fields. Valhalla creates a cascading resonance pattern through those entangled particles, Maddox continued as they approached. The energy will propagate through their entire network simultaneously, overloading and destroying any connected Galaxis technology. And the risks? Vex asked, though she already knew. Quantum entanglement doesn't care about conventional space-time, Maddox said grimly. We're essentially sending a shockwave through the quantum substrate of reality. The calculations suggest it will be contained to Galaxis systems, but she didn't need to finish. They were minutes away from gambling with forces they barely understood. The command center buzzed with tense activity as technicians prepared the system. Massive screens displayed the approaching Galaxis fleet, now just 12 hours from Earth. Admiral, called out Commander Nassar from across the room. Priority communication from Proxima Centauri. They've resurfaced. Vex rushed to the console. The face on the screen belonged to Colonel Era Solis, commander of the Proxima Defense Forces. Her uniform was torn and bloodied, her expression haunted. Admiral, we didn't go dark willingly, Solis reported. We were overrun, but something happened. A faction of Galaxis forces turned on the others. They're fighting amongst themselves. Now, whispers erupted around the command center. Civil war? Now? Vex questioned. Not exactly, Solis continued. The rebels identified themselves as the Shackle Breakers. They claim to be slaves of the Dominion, a conquered species forced to fight for the Galaxies. They're requesting asylum and offering tactical data on the main fleet. Maddox clutched Vex's arm. We need to delay Valhalla. We can't trust this, High General Kalani argued from the main communication feed. It's a deception to buy time. What if it isn't? Maddox countered. If there are enslaved species integrated into their military, activating Valhalla would kill them too. We'd be no better than the Galaxies. Vex stared at the countdown timer. 11 hours, 42 minutes until the main fleet reached Earth. Not enough time to verify Solis's report, but too significant to ignore. Get me direct contact with these shackle breakers, she ordered. Hours. Later, Vex found herself face-to-face with Zorith, a reptilian being with iridescent scales and 4 eyes that blinked independently. Behind him stood representatives of 5 other species, all former adversaries of humanity, all claiming enslavement. The Dominion's true rulers, the Galaxis Prime, are few, Zorith explained, his translator converting hisses into comprehensible speech. They conquest, they subjugate, they implant control technology. We fight for them or our homeworlds die. Many fleets you face, not Galaxis but slaves. And now? Vex asked warily. Control implants failing on some ships. Another alien, a luminous, almost spectral being, interjected. Opportunity seized, freedom sought. But coming fleet still mostly controlled. Vex exchanged glances with Maddox, whose expression reflected the moral quandary they now faced. The Valhalla project would not discriminate, it would destroy the oppressors and the enslaved alike. We need a way to target only the control technology, Maddox murmured, already lost in calculation. Vex stared at the countdown. Less than 11 hours to recalibrate humanity's final weapon, or decide if genocide was an acceptable price for survival. Recalibrating Valhalla isn't just difficult, it's theoretical insanity, Dr. Maddox declared, pacing the command center, while complex equations spiraled across holographic displays. We're talking about isolating specific quantum signatures while ignoring others, like performing neurosurgery with a sledgehammer. 8 hours remained before the Galaxies fleet reached Earth. Every available scientist had been diverted to the Valhalla complex, working alongside the unexpected alien allies to identify the unique signature of the control implants. The prime implants operate on a sub-band frequency, explained Zella, a gaseous entity contained within an environmental suit. Her species, the Volari, had been master engineers before their enslavement. They maintained dominance through constant quantum reinforcement of obedience algorithms. Admiral Vex watched the collaboration with guarded hope. On one screen, the Federation's remaining fleets positioned themselves for Earth's defense, a futile gesture without Valhalla's success. On another, the approaching armada continued its relentless advance. Admiral, Commander Nassar called urgently. New development. The lunar defense grid just picked up unusual activity within the Galaxies fleet. Several dreadnoughts have broken formation and are exchanging fire with other vessels. More slaves breaking free? Vex questioned. Unknown. But it's causing chaos in their approach vector, Nassar replied. Vex turned to Zorith. Could this be happening elsewhere, throughout their empire? The reptilian commander's secondary eyelids flickered, their equivalent of contemplation. Control systems standardized across empire. If failing here, possibly failing elsewhere. That's our opening, interjected High General Kalani from the war room feed. We need to exploit this disarray with conventional forces while we have the chance, and sacrifice those breaking free, challenged Dr. Maddox. We're close to isolating the control signature. President Nyaga's voice cut through the debate. How close, Doctor? In measurable terms. Maddox hesitated. 3 hours minimum, maybe longer. The Galaxies will reach orbital engagement range in 5 hours, Nassar reminded them. The weight of command had never felt heavier on Vex's shoulders. We proceed on parallel tracks, continue recalibration efforts but prepare conventional forces for engagement, and, she paused, acknowledging the gamble she was about to take. Transmit the prime control frequency data to all Earth colonies and outposts with instructions to broadcast disruption signals. That's wildly beyond protocol, Kalani objected. So, is extinction, Vex countered. If we can trigger more rebellions throughout their territory, it divides their attention and resources. As orders spread throughout the remaining human territories, the Valhalla complex transformed into an unprecedented collaboration between species that had, until hours ago, been mortal enemies. Zorith worked alongside human technicians, his clawed, hands surprisingly dexterous as they modified sensor arrays. Your Valhalla weapon, knew of it through intercepted communications. Galaxies Prime fear it greatly. Yet they still attacked, Vex noted. Prime believed themselves superior, untouchable, Zorith replied. Cannot comprehend defeat. But slave species, we observe, we learn, we wait for opportunity. The waiting ended abruptly when the facility shook violently. Warning klaxons blared. Breach. In Sector 7, a technician shouted. We have ground forces infiltrating the complex. Security footage revealed humanoid figures in Galaxies battle armor, cutting through security personnel with brutal efficiency. Valhalla compromised. Zorith, hissed urgently. Must be elite prime forces, they come for weapon. Vex's decision was immediate. Lock down all sections. Security teams to defensive positions. Dr. Maddox, how much more time do you need? At least 2 hours for recalibration, Maddox responded, her hands never pausing their work on the control interface. You have one, Vex stated, drawing her sidearm. Commander Nassar, evacuate all non-essential personnel. Zorith, I need your fighters. The reptilian commander bared razor-sharp teeth in what might have been a smile. We fight Prime together, now. As security barriers sealed and weapon systems activated, Vex positioned herself at the entrance to the main chamber. Behind her, scientists of 6 species raced against time to transform a weapon of mass destruction into an instrument of liberation. The sound of plasma fire and screams echoed through the corridors. The Galaxies Prime had gambled everything on this strike. If they could destroy Valhalla before it activated, Earth would fall. What they hadn't counted on was the ferocity with which their former slaves would fight alongside humans to prevent that outcome. The attack on Valhalla complex was precise and devastating, exactly what Vex would have expected from the Galaxies Prime. These weren't mindless drones or enslaved soldiers, but the elite warriors of a species that had conquered a significant portion of the galaxy. "They've breached the tertiary defenses," Nassar reported, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. "Security teams are engaging, but they're using some kind of phase technology to bypass barriers." In the central chamber, Dr. Maddox and her multi-species team worked frantically on the recalibration, surrounded by armed guards. The pulsing blue orb of Valhalla's core fluctuated ominously with each adjustment. 63% complete, Maddox called out, not looking up from her work. "But the targeting parameters are becoming unstable. We need more time." Time was the one resource they didn't have. The clash of weapons drew closer, and on the tactical displays, the main Galaxies fleet continued its approach, now just 4 hours from Earth. Vex made a decision. "Commander Nassar, initiate Protocol Thermopylae." Nassar's expression tightened. "Understood, Admiral." Protocol Thermopylae was simple in concept, a deliberately narrow choke point where defenders could hold off superior numbers. In practice, it meant sealing all alternate routes to the central chamber and concentrating their forces at a single entrance. A suicide mission to buy time. "I fight with humans," Zorth declared, checking the captured Galaxies weapon in his clawed hands. Several of his warriors nodded in agreement. "No," Vex countered. "Your knowledge is too valuable. If we fail here, the resistance elsewhere needs leaders who understand both the Prime and their technology." A distant explosion rocked the complex, followed by emergency lighting flooding the corridors with red. "They've detonated something in the upper levels," a technician reported. "Structural integrity compromised in sections 12 through 17. "That's directly above us," Nassar realized. "They're trying to dig straight down." Vex's tactical mind raced. The Galaxies were creating their own entry point, bypassing the defensive choke point entirely. It was what she would have done. "Evacuate Dr. Maddox and critical team members to backup Site Omega," she ordered. "Begin emergency transport of the core components." "We can't move Valhalla in its current state," Maddox protested. "The entanglement field will collapse." "Then stabilize what you can and prepare for relocation," Vex insisted. "We've lost the advantage here." As if to emphasize her point, part of the ceiling collapsed inward. Through the shower of debris, armored figures dropped into the chamber. 8-foot-tall humanoids with glossy black carapaces and multifaceted eyes. The Galaxies Prime, seen in person for the first time by human eyes. What followed was chaos. The guards opened fire immediately, but the Prime moved with unnatural speed, their phase shields deflecting most projectiles. They didn't speak, didn't demand surrender. They simply killed with mechanical precision. Vex found herself face to face with one of the towering beings, its weapon leveled at her chest. Time seemed to slow as she registered its alien features, the cold calculation in its compound eyes. The blast came not from the Prime's weapon but from behind Vex. The Prime staggered, a smoking hole in its carapace, revealing circuitry beneath what had appeared to be organic material. "Not even fully biological," spat Zella, the Valari engineer, her environmental suit's integrated weapon still glowing hot. The revelation hit Vex like a thunderbolt. "They're hybrids, biomechanical." "Yes," hissed Zorth, firing repeatedly at another advancing Prime. Prime long ago merged with machines. Why they need slaves. Lost connection to organic existence. Dr. Maddox's head snapped up from her console. "That changes everything. If they're partially mechanical, Their quantum signatures would be fundamentally different from their slaves. A new explosion tore through the far wall as more prime forces breached the chamber. The defenders were outnumbered and outgunned, falling back toward the Valhalla core. "Recalibration at 84%, Maddox shouted over the chaos. "I need just a few more minutes." "Buy her time," Vex commanded, taking cover behind an overturned console. "Everything depends on it." As the defenders fought with desperate courage, Vex caught glimpses of unexpected heroism, former enemies united against a common threat. A Valari sacrificing its containment suit to create a toxic gas cloud that slowed the prime advance. Zorith's warriors forming a living shield around human technicians. The minutes stretched like hours until Maddox's triumphant cry rose above the battle. "It's done. Valhalla is recalibrated." But their victory was precarious. Half the defenders were dead or wounded. The remainder wouldn't last much longer, and the Valhalla activation sequence required 3 minutes of uninterrupted processing. "Cover the core," Vex ordered, emptying her weapon into an advancing prime. Nothing gets through. What happened next would be told and retold in the annals of human history, the last stand at Valhalla core, where the fate of not just humanity, but countless enslaved species hung in the balance. The Valhalla countdown reached 2 minutes when Admiral Vex took a Caraxis energy blast to her left side. She collapsed against the core housing, pain searing through her body. "Admiral!" Nassar shouted, dragging her behind a barricade. The chamber had become a graveyard. Bodies of humans, allies and prime scattered across the floor amidst the rubble. "Status," she managed through gritted teeth. "Activation sequence at 70%, Nassar reported. "But we're down to a dozen defenders. They're overwhelming us." Through pain-blurred vision, Vex saw the truth of it. The prime forces had established a foothold in the chamber and were methodically eliminating resistance. Dr. Maddox worked frantically at the core controls, protected by Zorith and 3 of his warriors, but they wouldn't last another minute. "Commander," Vex gasped, clutching Nassar's arm. "Emergency Protocol Sierra 9. Nassar's face drained of color. "Admiral, that's our only option," she finished. "Do it." Sierra 9, the deliberate overload of the facility's fusion reactor. It would vaporize the complex and everyone in it, but the electromagnetic pulse might disrupt the prime long enough for Valhalla to complete its activation. As Nassar reluctantly moved to initiate the self-destruct sequence, alarms blared with a different tone. On the few functioning displays, new data flashed urgently. Multiple hyperspace signatures detected, called out a surviving technician. Massive energy readings just outside orbit. A deafening boom shook the chamber as a section of wall disintegrated. Through the new breach poured not more prime but beings of varying physiology, all wearing makeshift armor with a single unifying symbol, a broken chain. "Reinforcements from the Proxima Rebellion," Zorith identified, his voice thick with disbelief. The battle shifted instantly. The new arrivals fought with the fury of the long oppressed, their knowledge of prime tactics evident in how they targeted weak points in the carapaces. In orbit above Earth, an even more astonishing scene unfolded. Hundreds of ships, from massive dreadnoughts to agile fighters, emerged from hyperspace, immediately engaging the approaching Caraxis fleet. Their transponders identified vessels from dozens of worlds, all unified under the Shacklebreaker banner. "How?" Vex whispered as Nassar returned to report this development. "The frequency disruption we transmitted," he explained, supporting her as they watched the tactical display. "It cascaded through their network faster than we anticipated, freeing ships throughout their empire. They've been converging on Earth, coming to aid the species who found the prime's weakness." The Valhalla countdown reached 30 seconds as the last prime in the chamber fell under the combined assault. Dr. Maddox stood at the activation console, her finger hovering over the final command. "Wait," Vex called out, struggling to her feet. "The situation has changed." "We can't stop now," Maddox argued. "The recalibrated Valhalla will only target prime technology. It's our best chance to free the entire galaxy in one stroke." "But we don't need to commit genocide," Vex countered. Look at the orbital readings. Liberated ships outnumber loyal Prime vessels 3-1. We can win conventionally. Zorith approached, his scales dulled with fatigue and injury. Admiral speaks with warrior's honor, but tactician's mind sees truth. Prime will regroup, adapt, recapture. Their control extends beyond this battle. Valhalla, only certain victory. The orbital display shifted, showing new hyperspace signatures. More Galaxies reinforcements were arriving, these moving in perfect formation, clearly still under Prime control. 10 seconds to activation point, Maddox warned. After that, we lose our window, as the entanglement pattern destabilizes. The weight of the galaxy seemed to press down on Vex's shoulders as she looked around the chamber. Humans fighting alongside former enemies, the bodies of those who had sacrificed everything for this moment. The Prime aren't just our enemy, she realized aloud. They're the enemy of all organic life, conquerors who enslave and discard entire civilizations. 5 seconds, Maddox counted. Vex locked eyes with Zorith, seeing in the alien's gaze a reflection of her own resolve. Both understood the burden of this decision. Activate Valhalla, Vex commanded. Dr. Maddox pressed her palm against the scanner. The blue orb at the center of the chamber pulsed once, twice, then erupted into blinding white light that seemed to fold in upon itself, collapsing to a pinpoint before vanishing entirely. For several heartbeats, nothing happened. Then, throughout the chamber, the fallen Prime bodies convulsed as their integrated systems failed catastrophically. On the tactical displays, every Prime ship, both the approaching fleet and their reinforcements, suddenly lost power and momentum. It's working, Maddox breathed, watching the readings. The quantum cascade is propagating through their network at superluminal speeds. Across the galaxy, on countless worlds, the same scene played out as Prime control systems failed simultaneously. Slave implants deactivated, control ships went dark, and everywhere the oppressed rose up against masters suddenly rendered vulnerable. In that moment, the balance of power in the galaxy shifted irrevocably. Vex slumped against the console, exhaustion and injury finally claiming her, but as consciousness faded, she heard Nassar's triumphant report. Earth is secure. The Prime fleet has been neutralized. Humanity had survived, not by standing alone but by becoming the catalyst for a galactic revolution. 3 months after the Battle of Earth, Admiral Ilara Vex stood at the viewport of the newly commissioned diplomatic vessel Unity, watching as representatives from 27 formerly enslaved species gathered in the Central Assembly Hall. Her wounds had mostly healed, though doctors told her she would always walk with a slight limp, a small price for survival. The Galactic Provisional Council is ready to begin session, Admiral, announced Commander Nassar, now wearing the insignia of her senior attaché. President Niaga requests your presence for the opening address. Vex nodded, smoothing the formal white uniform that had replaced her battle-worn tactical gear. How many worlds have confirmed participation? 116 confirmed, 37. Pending, Nassar replied. The Valari Coalition brought in another 12 systems yesterday. Reports from the Outer Rim suggest Prime resistance has been completely eradicated in those sectors. The aftermath of Valhalla had exceeded all projections. The targeted quantum cascade had destroyed not just the Prime's control systems, but their entire technological infrastructure. Investigations of captured facilities revealed the horrifying truth. The Galaxies Prime had ceased being truly organic centuries ago, becoming increasingly integrated with their machines, until distinction was meaningless. When Valhalla struck, it effectively ended their existence. The assembly hall buzzed with dozens of languages, translation devices working overtime as former enemies became cautious allies. At the center of the hall stood the Remembrance Pillar, a monument listing every world that had fallen to the Prime before liberation came. Admiral Vex greeted Dr. Maddox, approaching with Zorith and Zella. The scientist had become something of a legend, the architect of galactic liberation. The technical consortium has completed its analysis of the Prime archives recovered from their home world. And? Vex prompted. They were dying, Maddox said simply. Their biological components were failing after millennia of synthetic integration. They needed organic templates to sustain themselves, that's why they conquered. Each enslaved species provided genetic material for their experiments. Harvesting life to extend their own, Zorith added, his voice carrying the weight of his people suffering. When one species proved incompatible, they moved to the next. Vex absorbed this revelation grimly. And humanity? Were we compatible? Remarkably so, Maddox confirmed. Our neurological structure was particularly adaptable to their integration protocols. Earth wasn't just another conquest, it was to be their salvation. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The very species the Prime had targeted for exploitation had instead engineered their downfall. President Niaga approached their group, looking both exhausted and invigorated. The past months had aged him visibly, but purpose burned bright in his eyes. It's time, he said simply. As they moved toward the central podium, Vex surveyed the assembled representatives, so many different evolutionary paths, physiologies, and cultures, yet united by shared trauma and nascent hope. You're about to make history, Niaga murmured to Vex. The first human-Xeno alliance was supposed to be a defensive pact. Now you're laying the groundwork for a galactic confederation. Not me, Vex corrected. All of us. Humans alone couldn't have defeated the Prime. It took a unified effort. The assembly quieted as they reached the podium. President Niaga spoke first, welcoming the delegates and acknowledging the sacrifices that had brought them to this moment. Then, as planned, he introduced Admiral Vex as the architect of the Prime's defeat. Standing before representatives of civilizations she hadn't known existed 6 months ago, Vex felt the weight of the moment. I am not here to celebrate a military victory, she began, her voice carrying throughout the chamber. I am here to recognize a triumph of collective will. For centuries, the Prime divided us, exploited our differences, and prevented us from recognizing a fundamental truth, that despite our diverse origins, we share common values: freedom, self-determination, and the right to chart our own evolutionary course. She gestured to the remembrance pillar. We cannot bring back the worlds that were lost, nor the countless beings who perished under Prime dominion. But we can honor them by building something unprecedented, a galactic community founded not on conquest, but cooperation. Throughout, the chambered translation devices conveyed her words in hundreds of languages, but the intent required no translation. The Prime had ruled through division. Survival would depend on unity. The Earth Federation offers its resources, knowledge, and fleet remnants not as tools of dominance but as contributions to our shared security, Vex continued. The Valhalla Protocol has been completely dismantled, its specifications erased. We will not replace one potential tyranny with another. This announcement caused a stir. Many had hoped to access the technology that had defeated the Prime. But Vex and the Federation Council had been unanimous. Some weapons were too dangerous to exist, even in supposedly safe hands. Instead, we proposed the formation of the Galactic Concordat, an alliance of equals dedicated to mutual defense, scientific advancement, and the rehabilitation of devastated worlds. No single species will lead. All will contribute according to their abilities and receive according to their needs. As she concluded her address, Vex locked eyes with Zorith, who gave the subtle head tilt that served as his species' nod of approval. The vote to establish the Concordat was nearly unanimous. Only 3 species abstained, all from systems so distant they had barely felt Prime oppression. The rest recognized a simple truth. The galaxy had changed forever, and isolation was no longer viable. Later, as celebration echoed through the Unity's halls, Vex found herself back at the viewport, watching Earth slowly rotate beneath them. Having second thoughts? Asked Maddox, joining her with a glass of amber liquid. Reflecting, Vex corrected. 16 years ago, we thought we were fighting for humanity's survival alone. In the end, we fought for something much larger, and won, Maddox added. Vex's lips curved in a small smile. The war is over. Now comes the harder part. building something worthy of the sacrifices made. Below them, Earth glowed blue and green, scarred but healing. Around them, the ships of 24 species moved in coordination, no longer enemies or slaves but partners, in the galaxy's largest collaborative endeavor. In defeating the greatest threat to organic life, humanity had not just secured its own future, but helped forge a new one for countless civilizations. The final battle for Earth had become the first chapter in a much greater story, one that would be written together. The Prime had seen humans as merely useful genetic templates. How fitting that their greatest miscalculation was underestimating humanity's most valuable trait, the capacity to recognize themselves in others, to extend the circle of empathy beyond their own kind, and to fight as fiercely for allies as for themselves. It wasn't just human fuck yeah after all. It was life itself prevailing against those who would mechanize and control it. And in this hard-won peace, Admiral Ilara Vex finally allowed herself to hope.